Welcome to a special grocery shop edition of our OmniTalk Spotlight series. I'm your host, Chris Walton.
And I'm Ann Mazinga.
And we're the founders of OmniTalk, a content platform dedicated to researching the people, the companies, and the technologies that are shaping the future of retail. We want to give a special thanks to our sponsors today for a grocery shop. First of which is Cleveron. Cleveron is a full-service package handover partner offering in- and outdoor locker solutions to retailers and grocers worldwide. Thanks to more than 13 years of experience and partnerships with the biggest names in the business, Cleveron is one step ahead of the challenges retailers face, creating innovative robotic solutions that save space, time, and money. And of course, Untie Knots. Untie Knots is a European-based tech company now coming to North America. Their SaaS solution, Loyalty Challenge, uses hyper-personalization and gamification to digitally engage shoppers and grow share of wallet for retail clients and brands. Now, Ann, OmniTalk is our name and omnichannel retailing is our game.
Oh, yes.
And today we are spotlighting a company leveraging technology to help retailers and brands deliver the right message at the right time and in a brand safe way to amplify the in-store customer experience. Joining us today is Cooler Screens co-founder and CEO Arsen Avakian. Arsen, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good morning, guys.
Yeah, it's great to have you, man. First, I think you've got a really interesting background. So I think we have to start there because I think the big question Ann and I had in researching for this podcast was, how does someone go from being the founder of Argo Tea to now leading a company that aims to digitize in-store displays and marketing on cooler screens? Please explain that to us, if you will.
Well, I wanted to keep my background as simple. I went from IT to T and now back to IT, right? So what a lot of people don't know is I'm a tech. I grew up in tech as a kid. First, my first startup business, then worked for a bunch of big tech companies and all that. So then I had the divergence to go into the consumer business. So 18 years ago, I started Argo, and frankly, if it wasn't for T, there would never be cooler screens. And with no exaggeration, spending thousands of hours in the aisles of the stores, like whether it's the Targets or Walgreens, Walmart's, Kroger's, 7-Elevens, right? Just obviously for the reason scratching my head and saying, how do I sell them more tea, right? But by being there in the aisles, that's where a lot of these kind of aha moments, as every founder story usually goes, right? Those aha moments happen, and to me it was two moments, right? One was seeing that, I call it a consumer gap, the consumer experience gap, and which became the foundational idea for cooler screens, that the core idea that the consumers deserve a far better experience than what is available to them in a brick and mortar retail. And that concept of CX then guided everything we have done by bringing the best of technology and e-commerce like technology inside physical brick and mortar store. And then the second aha moment was, as a brand owner, I could never outspend the big boys, right? The Cokes and Pepsis and Liptons, and seeing that very kind of like what I guess everybody calls it, the first moment of truth, right? I mean, if you can connect with the consumers at the point of shelf, it was the obvious thing, and we put a ton of money into it. We would raise the sales anywhere from 40 to 60, 70% at times. Every time we were able to get on that shelf with some sort of a messaging and impacting the consumer behavior. So those two things kind of together, overlaid with my tech background, was, what if we could change the shelf? Instead of a traditional shelf, let's turn it into a digital shelf.
And what was your tech background there? Like inside of that, did you have UX experience? Did you have e-commerce experience?
Well, everything from my education, computer science, undergrad, to then my first startup business was, this is in late 90s, early 2000s. I thought if I just go buy the one-time license of all the big enterprise software companies like SAPs and Siebel's, I2s, and then I put a bunch of hackers to break the code, and I thought I started selling this online as a subscription. This is, remember, this is late 90s, early 2000s, before those big software companies showed up and said, time out, you can't do that, right? That's actually out. So little did I know that 20 years later, we're going to call it a cloud, right? Not trying to say I was a futurist, right? But maybe a little bit ahead of myself. I ended up going to work with I2 Technologies. You may remember, a big supply chain management software company, later got acquired by JDA. So a ton of background there, learning about the retail technologies, the merchandising, category management. So all that was the kind of the background. And then getting minted as an entrepreneur in a consumer space, building a retail tea brand. That the two kind of the intersection of the two backgrounds, I guess, is why cooler screens.
I'm glad I asked that question. That's great.
Well,
Yeah.
I want to know, Arsen, like how did you start that first prototype? I mean, you said you were spending time in the aisles. Like, I think most people I know who don't have the background that you have would be like, I got to just figure out like a better design for my like little shelf label
Right.
that is, you know, 2 for $6 or something. Like, how did this evolve into what we know of cooler screens as today?
The thing is, that's a great question, right? Because I've been asked by whether it's investors or the Silicon Valley folks, right? How come technologists don't see the solution, right? Well, they don't know there is a problem. And then when you're in the consumer space, we know that there is a problem, but because we don't have the technology background, maybe we don't know if there is another way to think about it, right? So I think it probably truly, I give credit to my kind of this dual background that allowed me to think of this, I call it the surface of inside the stores, right? As an opportunity to convert and transform them into a digital canvas. Everything could become a pixel.
Sure.
But the CX gap that I referred to at the beginning, guys, it was pretty obvious. So you have consumers walking around the brick and mortar stores, right? And they got the first thing in their hands is the phone, and they're looking up basic information, how much sugar is in this product, how many calories. With my tea product, like I would see customers would come, they can't see through this condensation laden door, and then they open the door, they grab the bottle. First thing you see, they're squinting, trying to figure out this little fine print of how much sugar or calories are in the product, right? Everything that today in an online world, we take it for granted. Information is easy, transparent, and simple, accessible. But when we walk into a brick and mortar store, none of that is available. So I thought if we could bring in the digital surfaces with the power of the AI that actually contextualizes the right content at the right time to the right person, we can create a unique, I call it a hybrid, people call it phygital, right? Physical, digital, whatever new buzzwords, right? But, and I know augmented reality means a whole different thing, but it's a digitally augmented shopping experience inside the physical store. It's the best of both worlds. And the whole thesis was that the brick and mortar is not dying. It's far from being dead. It's just going to reinvent itself. And here we are. That's why cooler screens.
Right, exactly. And that's what we've seen through the pandemic too. Well, paint the picture for us, if you will, because, you know, we've got you on a podcast here, essentially. It's an audio recording for the most part. Paint the picture for the audience, if you will, of what this actually looks like in practice as best you can.
Yeah, so there is two elements to this, right? One of them is the digital merchandising, the planograms. If your audience are the retailers and category people from the brands, they'll all know what that means. But the consumers, when they walk into a store, they'll now, if they, again, let's speak about the cooler freezer section, which is where we started, although we're already piloting into a bunch of other areas in the beauty, in the healthcare. So, but that's kind of like down the road, right?
Okay. Cool.
The cooler freezer, a ton of traffic, people come through the aisles into the perimeter of the store. Every gas station, C-store, you walk in, you got the big wall of these coolers and freezers in front of you. So from a distance, the consumers will see relevant promotions and messages that would be just like, imagine a big red of Coca-Cola inviting you to come in, or it could be the big red of Target. When the consumers see that, that draws them towards that section. So we'll measure the funnel of a conversion in a very similar way how e-commerce guys would do. This is where the science of e-commerce comes in. We'll see how much we're able to draw traffic towards the section. What messaging attracts them? What interaction is attracting them? Now, when the consumers approach, and we call this in technical terms, the inner ring versus the outer ring. They're within the, call it a 6 to 10 feet distance from the screens or from the doors. All of a sudden, magically, all these doors transform into a beautiful digital version of a planogram. So now you have this brilliant 4K digital displays that are showing you the actual products that are behind the door. And as you get closer, you might have even more interactive experiences where you get closer and maybe that Argo bottle may come up and say, hey, I'm locally brewed if it's if you're standing in Chicago, or it's organic, right? Now, these are the kind of pieces of information that it's fair trade, it's organic, or whatever it is, that to you as a consumer, it's very native, contextually relevant information that helps you make a better purchasing decision. Or it could be simply like in a frozen section. It's not just you're staring at a package of a frozen broccoli, but now there is actually a recipe that with a QR code that you can download so which gives you an idea of what to make for the dinner that evening, right? But it also can have a promotional message. It's 3 p.m. It's 90 degrees outside, and you're standing for more than 3 seconds in front of the ice cream door. And the Haagen-Dazs and Ben & Jerry's could show up and competing for your kind of purchase and say, hey, I got this new green tea strawberry flavor. Do you want to buy me, right? Very contextually relevant retail media done in store with the best of online shopping experience from a merchandising perspective.
Yeah, and I think the key point you mentioned there too, that's something we talk about all the time, is you're actually getting the data capture from what's happening inside that now omni-channel experience in a lot of way, where you're bringing digital into that world in a new way to capture what's happening to consumers and understand the conversion and the impact on the basket they're having as they're viewing this type of marketing collateral, so to speak. Well, all right. So you guys have been in the news a lot with Walgreens. I think that's where I first came upon you guys in terms of the work you're doing there. Why don't you take us through that? And I know you got a big expansion going on with them as well. You know, take us into the real world application of this now. What has that project been like for you in terms of what you've learned, how you've brought it to market, and where's it going next?
Walgreens was our foundational partner. They were the early believers in us 3 years ago. Look, it was as simple as like, hey, this sounds like a big grand idea, but I have no idea it's going to work. I'll give you 6 stores. Why don't you go just pilot it?
Is that what it was? 6 stores? You just ran.
This is 3 years ago.
Piloted it.
So I had to get on a plane and run around all over Asia, from Japan, Korea, China, and just beg all of these big high-tech manufacturers, saying, I basically want to build this big giant iPad with a lot of compute modules and specialty sensors. And finally Foxconn believed in us, and they said, we'll build a prototype. I mean, it was to say it was kind of like duct tape, but it worked. It didn't matter, right? I wanted to just pilot and see if consumers actually want that digital experience in a store.
Right.
Because the last thing we want in our life as humans and shoppers is another Times Square screen or another TV ad, right? We don't want to inundate. But the art of digital merchandising was that CX, which I said is guiding everything we do, is where we focused. And it worked. We call it a CX score, NPS, like a score measuring. 93% of the consumers, the third parties intercepted and surveyed, tens of thousands of people they surveyed. They said over 90% people said, hey, I prefer this new digital in a physical experience better than the good old traditional door or the shelf. So when the consumers said, I love it, when they were delighted, then it was a question, well, can we now convert that funnel? Can they actually spend more money? Right. And when I started the business with my partners, I said, guys, this with the traditional established retailers, if we get a quarter point, half a point sales lifts, we're going to high five, we're going to celebrate. So I'm not here, like, I honestly don't want to come across like I'm bragging or I'm selling, right? But we saw in average now, we have 4 or 5 of the Fortune 20 retailers in our network. We have dozens of other retailers now. Walgreens is the big one, of course, growing. They're kind of a step ahead of everyone because they started earlier.
Implementation, as retailers typically do.
Yeah, right? But we're seeing the sales lifts nearly at the 3 to 10% incremental sales lifts measured by APT MasterCard. Right.
Wow.
I mean, you guys come from retail.
Yeah.
Surreal numbers.
Yeah, those
surreal
are crazy
numbers.
Yeah.
And then when these kind of sales lifts came from, like I said, from on a low end from 3% to over 10% incremental sales lifts, we got over 150 brands saying, I want to be part of this, because just like with Google, who had a vision that they can digitize the 0 moment of truth, right? The research when people, before they go shopping, we're taking that first moment of truth, the shelf, and we're digitizing that decision a few seconds before you make the selection. So we've built the marketplace. We've gotten in just the last few months to a scale very, very quickly. We have over 77 million monthly consumer traffic now.
Wow.
Yep. I mean, that just put that into context. I think Amazon has about 200 million monthly traffic.
Okay.
So, but remember, guys, like, I mean, I'm blessed with the partners, like whether it's the Walmarts or Kroger's or the Walgreens, right? So I'm digitizing their existing traffic. These great retail partners of ours, they were building their big giant traffic in their stores for decades. Well, all we did is we digitized and we created a new shopping experience for consumer and an access for the brands to now connecting that new retail media platform with those consumers.
Well, and we're at Groceryshop, Arsen. We have a lot of grocery retailers, convenience store retailers, drugstore retailers who are listening to this podcast. Can you tell us a little bit about what that like on-ramping looks like? I mean, what does it mean from the time that you have that first discussion with them? How do things transpire from that point on?
Early days, right? We would just say, listen, we need to do a pilot for both reasons, right? Because we're putting a lot of capital in those stores, and so our retail partners co-invest with us. So we wanted to understand, like, so there is a little bit of a due diligence happening on both sides. We'll roll out, like with Walgreens, the playbook was, let's do 6 stores. The numbers came so strong that Walgreens said, hey, before I make any big decisions, I want you to show and prove this to me at scale. Let's take a region of about 50 some stores.
Sure.
And a very diverse group of the stores, right? From the rural, suburban, urban, all kinds of demographics. So then the numbers came, frankly, even stronger. So, and that's when there was a readiness that let's go into first phase of our rollout is 2,500 stores. We're in all 30 national markets. And a similar playbook goes with a lot of other big kind of call it Fortune 20 retailers. Now, when you go into the smaller retailers, right, some of them are, they're comfortable to go full chain after we do the pilot because kind of Walgreens paved the way.
Yeah.
Right. They've a lot of technology, product market fit, check boxes already went through. And from the implementation perspective, it's a very simple process. It takes, believe it or not, less than like 5 minutes per screen per door. Really? So we can be in and out of a store, having the store converted digital in about an hour.
Wow. Yeah, that was actually going to be my next question. I was curious, like, how long it took, because like when I think of Walgreens versus like somebody like Walmart that you mentioned, where there's just a ton more screens in their footprint,
right?
You know, how long does it, what does that typical process look like? Are they going step by step? Are they doing the whole, frozen section? You know, how is it that quickly where you can do it overnight? Because I know that's always a big question for retailers that we should probably ask you about too. Is like, can you do this overnight? Do you have to shut the store down, or is this like something you can easily implement and get done very quickly?
This is all done overnight, right? Like I think last week alone we have digitized, I want to say 78 stores, maybe.
Okay.
Just in 1 week, right?
Wow.
So yeah, so we can do this at scale now. But remember, the power and reach of Cooler Screens extends far beyond our own team and technology. We partner with some big global leaders, right, in the tech space,
right?
Microsoft, Verizon, they're both equity partners in us, but also specifically for the cooler freezer section, we partner with a company called Dover. A lot of folks would know Dover. Essentially, there is about 17 million cooler freezer doors in the United States, and Dover would be building nearly 14 million of them. So we have a unique exclusive relationship with them, and this is a Fortune 500 company, right? So we have the power of big boys like that, plus Foxcons of the world in Asia, who make the big iPads to have engineering specs and designs. So it's not just he's a young startup company that can do this at scale. You got kind of the big deal, big ecosystem behind it. Yeah.
Yeah. As the former head of frozen food for Target, I am thinking to myself, yep, I know Dover well. And why didn't I have this 10 years ago when I was running that business? It would have been a delight. So.
Well, I mean, the sales lifts are I mean, it's coming. Yeah.
Yeah. And I had a good margin. I mean, that's a good margin business in grocery too. That's another piece of this that I hope people are thinking about.
Who's bringing you in at this stage, and what are all the teams within a retailer that you're bringing together to partner?
So it's a CEO and a CMO conversation. It all depends on where the retail media actually resides in terms of executive sponsorship.
Right.
So some organizations, it resides with merchants. In some others, it resides with the marketing. And then more already advanced, sophisticated organizations like Walmart or Kroger, they have the Walmart Media, Walmart Connect, or Kroger 8451 precision marketing. So yeah, so I would say, or Target, Roundel, right? So in that kind of call it the elite of the biggest, most sophisticated retailers, these resides in whatever the executive sponsorship is for retail media. And that's where usually this partnership deal is done, which is, hey, you can focus on building retail media online for your e-commerce business, and no question e-commerce is going to keep growing, but no matter how much it grows, I mean, for the next 10 years, the e-commerce is still going to be less than maybe, or it's going to be 10% of the total pie, right? So we do the 90%, which is your in-store piece. And that's really challenging to do it right. And this is where like I said, the AI, bringing the best practices of e-commerce, and then unique proprietary technology around the hardware, IoT, right? All these pieces of puzzle. We did it pretty quickly over 3 years because we got the power of these big partners behind us. So when we get in front of a CEO or a CMO and we have this conversation about retail media, it's critical that they see that this isn't a high risk startup. This is actually backed by some tremendous power that this can be done at scale, because you do this at small scale, you're not going to get Cokes and P&Gs of the world pay attention to you. You have to do this at big scale. So it's not just me talking big. It's really, I mean, to be relevant in this space, you got to do this big and be able to sustain it big.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think people forget that a lot of times too, which was something we espouse a lot. To test this, you have to test this at the right scale, right? You got to go both feet in and make sure that this can work, and you put your best foot forward, so to speak.
Yeah.
But how you mentioned the media networks being a key piece for you in the partnership. Like, what are you seeing from them in terms of how they're thinking about this idea? What types of assets or creativity are they bringing to the table to make it as good as it can be from the get-go? Because I mean, in a lot of ways, you're reshaping or recreate, or I'd say manufacturing a new advertising platform, a new advertising vehicle for most of them.
Yeah.
So how are you thinking about that? How does that landscape play out now? Because this is new ground, like you said.
It is new ground, which makes it both exciting and also challenging, because I mean, you're kind of telling the marketers the unthinkable to date, right? You're saying, listen, you don't have to just blast a lot of your messaging, your branding to just a lot of eyeballs on TV, because you can. This is retail media differences, that you can reach the huge scale, but at the same time, you can drive performance. You're getting paid for your messaging at the same time, which they're not used to, right? Because for decades, they were conditioned from the Googles and Facebooks. They came up with all kinds of the likes and follows, right? All kinds of metrics, but nobody talks about sales lift.
Right.
And all of a sudden, retail partners like Walgreens with us, or Walmart or Kroger, any of the guys we work with, they now come to the brands and say, Coke, not only I'm giving you a few 100 million eyeballs, these are real people in the perfect brand safe environment inside my shop, ready to make a decision. Do they want, I don't know, the Diet Cherry or a Coke or a Pepsi, right? I'm giving you this perfect audience that you also can drive performance at the same time. They're about to spend money. So it's a powerful message that you can build brand equity and drive performance at the same time. And it breaks the barriers with the marketers who traditionally think he's my performance marketing, my shopper budget, trade marketing, and then versus here are my dollars that I will never really know what happened, but I have to do the TV. I really don't know what I'm doing on Facebook, but boy, they have a lot of followers there, right?
Yeah.
We kind of break that down, and cookie discontinuation and the privacy concerns, right? I think the big media, I'm not being competitive here, but I am, right? I mean, I think they shot themselves in the foot. It's like a drug. They got hooked on that personal data, on individual based targeting, all of that stuff that gets really creepy. And the consumer said, hey, time out, it's not good. Now regulators stepped in, they said, stop, you can't do it. So they're all big media, in my view, big media, big tech is scrambling, trying to figure out what is the answer for the marketers. And I think retail media with the first party data, where you can do the attribution you can, for the first time, we all know advertising works, but for the first time, we can actually tell them which half of the advertising really works. You can show the pink message or the blue message, and I'll see what people bought.
Right. Which we never could do before. You know, I mean, think about it. In store, you never knew that. You never knew how many people are walking down that aisle and who can.
Amazon, you know, those guys are brilliant, right? I mean, they obviously started the retail media movement online.
Yeah.
but this was just the e-commerce thing. And the first urge for all the brick and mortar retailers was, well, I got my little website, 5% of my total pie. I'm going to go build my own retail media network. There was not a week that I wouldn't wake up to the announcement of another retailer announcing their retail media network. But they all realized that the e-commerce is the small piece of the slice of the pie.
Right.
It's the in-store.
Great point. Yeah.
So
90%.
And that's what Cooler Screens
Or more.
kind of the thesis was, that we can enable your 90% and do what Amazon doing online. We can actually do it in your physical digital stores.
Yeah, it's very smart. All right. So to close this up, because you mentioned it probably 10 or 15 minutes ago, and I want to hear more about it. I know Ann does too. Now, so you talked about cooler screens, freezer stores. You teased a little bit about you looking into other categories throughout the store. So as you look to the end of this year and into 2022, what else can we expect to see from you guys?
Well, so I started in a cooler freezer aisle for a lot of obvious reasons, right? One, on my background, I was a beverage guy. I understood food and beverage section, ton of traffic on the perimeter and the cooler doors and kind of like this existing surfaces. So a lot of makes sense. But then, as you usually have the best story, right? When you're smart, your customers are the smartest ones. They actually teach you. Walgreens, the biggest pharmacy in the world. So what is their first reaction? They see all this working and they came to us and they said, hey, guys, like we love what you've done in that section, but frankly, this is even our secondary business. Our primary business is our pharmacy. And we think the patients would love to understand, let's say, what's the difference between Advil versus Aleve? They'd like to know, why should they get the branded or the generic? They'd like to get that patient education through the digital communication platform inside the our stores in our pharmacies. So they leaned in and they said, we want you to come into the pharmacy section. And then on top of that, you probably saw a lot of these retailers, pharmacies like Walgreens, they announced their deals like with Village MD. They're also believing in a vision that the point of care, like outpatient doctor offices, are now going to be open inside retail stores. Walmart is doing that with the Walmart Health and Oak Health partnership, and basically all the big retailers are doing this. So as the patient experience now is coming to point of care and point of dispense in that box of a pharmacy or a retail store, all of a sudden this becomes like such an aha moment from hey, you got to connect with these patients now, not consumers. We call them patients now.
Right.
So you can educate them, you can give them the information so they make a better decision about their health choices. And so patient outcomes, medication adherence, right? And so on. So now we have a very different set of metrics that Walgreens is teaching us.
Yeah.
So that becomes, so this is now the kind of the next thing that we're learning. We're doing a lot of interesting pilots with Walgreens guys, and we're learning. And then it's still confidential, but with some other even bigger retailers, they are driving us and they're saying, hey, imagine the beauty.
Right.
I mean, the consumers, again, I don't know exactly how to buy a lipstick, don't take me wrong, but I know that my wife, she'll spend a lot of time in a store trying to figure out what she wants. Right. And all that time I ask her, what is it that you want? And she's like, well, I need a lot of information. I want to try it out. And so the digital UX becomes such a kind of an obvious thing when you are in a store.
Especially, when you think about the YouTube beauty influencers, to be able to play a clip of applying that lipstick or a liner and then pointing down directly to that product right there to buy. I mean, it's really smart.
You know, the other one, like the merchant at Walmart, she's one of the smartest merchants I ever worked with, Andrea Albright. Just a shout out to her. Yeah. She took me to the gaming section, the electronics, and she's showing like, here we got shoppers who come in and they want to buy this $50 to $100, $200 games like the PlayStation, Xbox, etc. And these guys are standing there basically pushing a button, waiting for an associate to show up to give them the game. But these are digitally native shoppers who want to actually kind of play demo before they make that expensive decision.
Right.
So I'm excited because kind of like, we haven't even scratched the surface of bringing digital. I think it was, years ago, it was, let's just go and throw a bunch of TVs and screens, signage. And it didn't work because we just don't want more at us. But if you bring actually, like I said, the art of merchandising and the science of e-commerce together in a store, it works.
Well, and the point's huge for me. I'm glad you brought that up too, about just the proliferation of screens in the store. Because I think what's interesting about the cooler screen example in its iteration, its early form, is that's a permanent fixture, so to speak, in terms of what people can expect. So it's something that can live more evergreen. So I'm curious how much, I don't know how much you can tell us in some of these other categories, or how much you can tease to give us kind of a conceptualization of what does this look like that carries with that same ethos of being kind of an evergreen placement in the store that enables it to work with consumers that are shopping with it in that manner. Are you taking that same approach, or am I thinking about that the wrong way, Arsen?
No. Physical permanency is a huge pillar for us in our own strategy, right?
Okay.
Because you are inevitable in their life all of a sudden. You're there.
Yeah, it becomes too hard for the stores to operationalize it too, I would think.
So you're there. So the consumer kind of has to deal with it now, right?
Yeah.
But we don't want this to be, they have to deal with it. Now we want them to say, I want to deal with it because I find what I want far easier. When I'm making a decision in that pharmacy aisle, do I pick up Advil or Aleve? I actually, in just quick seconds, I see the information brilliantly displayed, easily displayed to me. So I pick the right medication for me. And so on, like examples of these use cases that the consumer value is like so simple, right? We don't need a lot of data science to bring a lot of simple value to consumers. And I think that's what was missed in the past, right? They would come in and they would say, I'm just going to put here and have Coke or somebody blast it to you the red message because they can. Well, no, consumer at some point says, you know what, guys, like I'm done, it's too much, and I'm going to prefer going shopping somewhere else. So that's to us the secret sauce for us. I call it. There's two parts of it. One was this, we call it a CX app, which is the digital merchandising platform, and that's that e-commerce conversion funnel. It's really understanding what's the shopper journey, the path to purchase, all this stuff, right? So we brought a lot of that into the CX app, and that software is running and constantly creates this unique experience, from the fish tank to gingerbread or the fall leaves, or the snowflakes coming entertainment wise. We have the other one you guys will love, since Jason is we have this really cool Easter eggs planted. The screens also have voice enabled capability, so consumers can come and they can say, hey, let's say Walmart, hey, Sam, can you show me all gluten-free items, or show me the vegan items, or tell me how much sugar is in this product. But also fun things. There will be campaigns like kids will drag their parents to the stores and they can say Leviosa to the screen, and all of a sudden all the screens are like levitating, right?
Like Harry Potter stuff. Yeah, you're right.
Harry Potter stuff, but it's an entertainment value, which means the shopping retail becomes a destination for experiences.
Right.
So we call it heart and minds concept. So anyway, so that's the first secret sauce. And then the second secret sauce is this contextual targeting, or a capability, which is you want to have contextually relevant messages delivered to the consumers at the right time at the right place. And that's a sophisticated data graph technology that collects the consumer behavioral signal, like how long is the consumer in front of the screen? Are they moving or not? Are they opening the door? By the way, all the stuff that e-commerce have been doing forever, right? They know how many seconds you're on this website, a web page. Did you click here? Did you scroll? Did you tap?
Well, did you put something back?
So we use IoT technology, which monitors in this privacy by design way all of these same behavioral signals. And then we look, it's like I said, it's 5 p.m. and somebody's standing in the frozen food section. Probably they're looking for their dinner tonight. And maybe there is a big game tonight happening, right? So you can now contextualize the messaging. So that whole big data, again, big buzzwords, right? The big data and AI is constantly analyzing all these signals. It's raining outside. It's 80 degrees outside. You're more than 3 seconds here. And finds pockets of predictable behavior or outcomes that if I show you this content, I have a statistically relevant model that the computer calculated that you'll probably open the door and you'll buy something more, so I can lift the sales by 12%. And I have a 78% statistical significance to that prediction. And that's the second secret sauce. So we have this AI for CX, consumer experience, and then we have this contextual targeting engine. Those two is what creates this magic.
Yeah, and the permanence of the placement, I think, helps aid in that analysis of that data too, right? Because it's more consistent over time.
Yeah.
In addition to probably the store employees like it better too, because they're not having to take things down and up and maintenance, all kinds of different things like we've seen throughout the years too.
You know,
the stuff can get out of whack.
Plan of compliance, out of stock management. We give the retailers amazing data, right? We have now sensors and the cameras on the inside of a door. Every time the door opens, we can actually tell them at any point in time what's on shelf. I mean, data that was before people didn't know what they have on shelf, right? The other one that I've heard, my favorite is when
because it could be in the cart or something like that too, right? Like that they don't know when they need to get. Yeah, that's a great point, especially in a high traffic store. Yeah, I never thought about that.
And imagine the DSDs, distributors, right? They will mess up the shelves and move things around. So the out of stock is a huge problem. But one of my favorite ones, which is much more trivial than this, is like they call them frozen fingertips. The employees, when you hang out a lot in those stores, you get to talk to.
I've done it myself. I've worked I worked Target stores for a long time. I know exactly how crappy a job that is.
The Mylars, right? The paper tags. The employees all of a sudden come to us and they're hugging us, guys, during the install, saying, "Well, thank you."
Yeah.
The store managers would say, especially now with COVID, they're all labor shortages a real deal. They would say, I can't find even employees willing to sign up for the shift when they need to do a reset.
Right.
Because they need to wear like this 5 layers of the gloves so they can change for after 20 minutes, you literally, your fingertips are frozen.
Yeah, it's awful.
All that is gone. So this electronic shelf tags, and which then leads to real-time pricing capabilities, surge pricing, all kinds of fun stuff that retailers can do.
Well, Arsen, there is so much for our listeners to be following with Cooler Screens and your work. I know you're going to be speaking at Groceryshop, so shout out to our listeners to check the agenda to be catching Arsen's talk at Groceryshop. If they aren't at Groceryshop or they just want to stay in touch with Cooler Screens and the work you're doing, where's the best place for them to stay up to date, Arsen?
Thank you. Well, first and foremost, there is a bunch of stores they can go visit, including in Vegas on the Strip. Some of the Walgreens stores, they have the technology. Yeah,
I'm gonna check that out.
I know for sure, like the one by Venetian.
Yeah, so we go there all the time.
So that's one, right? Two, you can always connect with us on our website, coolerscreens.com. My email is simple as arsen@coolerscreens.com, nothing secret. And then finally, my LinkedIn profile, Arsen Avakian. So thank you for your time, guys.
Awesome. Well, that was a great interview. I love that interview. Thank you so much, Arsen.
You made it fun. Thank you.
Yeah, great. That's what we try to do. Try to make it fun and insightful every time. So we appreciate that feedback too. It's awesome. Well, it's been great to sit down with you. Again, everyone listening, that's Cooler Screens co-founder and CEO, Arsen Avakian. And as always, to everyone listening, be careful out there.